Hello, kindergartners. We are going to move on to the second step of our Mondrian project. Last time you were here, we learned about Pete Mondrian, who is known for using vertical, so straight up and down, and horizontal, side to side, lines in his artwork. He also used the primary colors in his artwork. So the primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. And today I am going to do a demonstration to show you some different ways that you can color or paint your Mondrian project to make it look like a piece that Mondrian would have made. I will do that demonstration in just a second. Okay, so we left off last time with our project looking something like this, with a lot of vertical lines and a lot of horizontal lines and all sorts of different rectangle shapes and square shapes. Today what we're going to do is add colors like Pete Mondrian did. And just a reminder, he used black, he used white, and he used the primary colors, so the red, the orange, and the yellow. Now I had planned to have you use watercolor paints for this project, but I found out that there's a shortage on watercolors, so if you hadn't picked them up yet, there's a good chance that you wouldn't be able to find any, unless they were really expensive ones that I wouldn't recommend elementary kids using. So, if you have watercolors, I would like you to use those. If you don't, you can use markers or you can use crayons. But again, we're only using the warm and cool colors. Now, for this particular project, I only want you to use, or I'm sorry, not use, I only want you to leave one space on your project white. The rest of them we're going to color or paint in using the red, the blue, and the yellow. Now the other thing, and this can be a little bit tricky, is that we don't want a color to touch itself. So if I were to paint this yellow, I would not want to put yellow here, or here, or here, or here. Corner to corner, it's fine if I did yellow here and yellow here, okay? Now, once in a while you run into a little situation where you can't help it but to have them touch, and that's okay, all right? So I'm gonna demonstrate how to do this with watercolor paints, and then I'll show you also the crayon and the marker. I really wanna focus on the watercolors though, because I don't know if any of you have used them before. I'm sure some people have, but I wanna kind of teach you how to use them. So these are my watercolors. This is obviously a tray that's been used before. But you are going to notice that I have 3 different blue colors. Just be careful when you pick your blue, because sometimes there's blues that look kind of purplish, and we want to try to steer clear of that, so we don't want to accidentally use purple. I know that this blue is the color that I want. So when I'm putting water in, I always want to make sure that I put enough water in so that there's like a little teeny puddle in it. And I want to stir it up good, because if I just put water in and then dip my brush in, it's not going to be a very vibrant color. But if I stir it up, the color is going to look nice. So I have blue, and I am going to, since I have blue on my paintbrush, paint as many sections as I want to be blue while I have the blue on my brush. And I'm really taking my time so that I can stay in the lines and make this look nice and neat. Then I can go back over to my tray when I start running out of that paint, when it's not painting the best. And if that puddle disappears, I just put a little more water in it and stir it up some more. So maybe these are the only sections that I want to be blue. I may have to come back later and use more blue, but for now this looks good to me. And then I would change to yellow. And then again I would change to red, okay? Now, I showed you how to use the blue with watercolor. What I'm gonna do now is use red with my marker. Now, I had you use crayon to draw your black lines. Just be a little bit careful. Try not to get your marker into the crayon very much because the waxiness of the crayon can sometimes make your markers not work very well. So maybe I want that to be red. And I want this to be red. I've got to be a little bit careful because my paint is still wet and I don't want to smear it all over. Now, maybe I want to put red right here, but I have to double check because I don't want red to touch red. So right here it's fine because it's red touching blue, and here it's fine, it's red touching blue. But what about here? That would be red touching red, and I don't want that, so I can't put red there. I could put red here, or here, or here, but I can't put it there, okay? So the other option, so I've talked about painting, I've talked about marker. The other option is to use crayons, which would be just like coloring with marker, but you'd be using crayons. I want you to pick one and stick with that. So if you decide to use watercolor paints, just use watercolor paints for the whole project. If you decide to use markers, just use markers. And if you decide to use crayons, just use crayons, okay? One last thing that I want to talk to you about. When you are using watercolor paints, I used blue. I want to change colors. I have to wash my brush super good before I change to my colors. So I washed my brush out good. Now I'm going to move on to my yellow. I want to get a puddle in there. And I want to stir it around really, really well. And then I can paint my yellow. So maybe I'll put yellow right here. The other thing that you need to know about watercolor paints is that when you wash your brush out in the water, sometimes the water starts to get pretty dirty, and that will sometimes make your paints look sort of dirty. So you want to make sure if your water gets too dirty, now a little dirty is not a big deal. This is fine. But if it starts to look kind of like chocolate milk, you want to make sure you change it, okay? And remember, we're only leaving one white space. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.